Good morning, everyone. Isn't it a beautiful day? I mean, it's Chamber of Commerce Day out here, isn't it? Don't tell anybody else. Let's just keep it all to ourselves, if that's all right. Can everyone in the back hear me okay? I see you're commandeering that coveted shade space back there. Well, welcome everyone to the second installation of our annual Garden-Side Chickee Chats. A little warm today, so if you need to go seek refuge in some of the shady spots, please feel free, and we've got water over there, so stay hydrated. I want to first off recognize those of you here that are part of our annual membership. Thank you so much for joining as members, and for those of you who have yet to do it, don't delay. There'll be some changes coming up to the fall season as well as next winter season that will reflect, Palm Cottage's roots, if you will, as Naples' original private club. So we want you to be a part of it. So please consider joining the membership ranks. So our speaker today hails from the great state of Illinois. Like our county's namesake, my wife and I grew up a mere 180 miles from Illinois in Memphis. Although I don't recommend spending too much time in Cairo if you've ever been there. But being from Memphis, I like to tell some of our visitors that we're a little less Haldeman and a little more Collier, if you will. So we're all here today because of our passion for history and learning and the desire to preserve the sacred structures, artifacts, and stories that reflect how we came to be and who we are and what has defined this special community we call home. Our speaker today has dedicated his career as a trade professional to learning true craftsmanship and the art and science of historic preservation. He was instrumental in restoring Palm Cottage after the devastating effects of Hurricane Ian and continues to support our sustained efforts to care for our properties, as well as other local historic preservation initiatives like the renovation of the Bank of the Everglades building. In addition, he makes time to give back to the community, disseminating his specialized knowledge to others and personally supporting organizations like ours with which he is involved. It is my honor to introduce Master Carpenter, Society Club of 100 member and friend, Mr. John Brechel.
What a beautiful day. Down here in the center of the historic district of Naples. There is nothing like this. We're here in the center of the district with Naples' oldest home, the pier, which will once again be soon. But this is the culture, this is the atmosphere that drew me to Naples back in 2000. My name is John Brechel. I am owner of Classic Carpentry here in Naples. I've spent my entire life doing renovations, most of my life. If some of you remember in the early 80s when we had the big downturn, interest rates shot to like 16, 17%, and we were building new homes, and we got out of that immediately and went into renovations. In Chicago, we were doing historic renovations, and I have to be honest and say it wasn't on purpose. It was by default, because we were doing high-end renovations up and down the Gold Coast of Lake Michigan in towns like Highland Park, Wilmette, Winnetka, Glenview, where those people lived. And most of those homes, if not all of them when we got started, were turn-of-the-century homes. All wood frame construction, some with stucco veneer, some with brick veneer. But that's where we cut our teeth. There was a town there in called Evanston, Illinois, if any of you are from there, but filled with historic homes, and they have a lot of pride in their historical structures there, and they make it very difficult for a builder to do what he needs to do. So they're watching. They have architectural committees, reviews, and that's pretty typical up and down the coast. But in 2000, right around 2000, I came down because I had a client from one of those neighborhoods who bought a condo in the Provence, a penthouse, and was tired of dealing with Florida contractors and wanted me to come here and do all of the millwork in the penthouse. But as soon as I got off the plane, I had a buddy of mine from Chicago who was doing a project down in Port Royal, and I saw Old Naples. I picked up the phone and called my wife, and I said I found it. At that time, nobody was doing renovations here. Everything was tear down, build new. And so I knew that coming here that there was a special niche where we could follow our passion and what we do. So that brought me to Naples. And then it was not long after that that we got invited to do some work down in Old Naples. And that was great because we're going back to our roots of what we did in Chicago, wood frame moldings, replicating old stuff, restoring old things, and using all of our talents to be able to do that. In Naples, what makes it somewhat easy for us is there's a lot of trades in Naples and in Collier County, Lee County, and not that they don't have any experience in wood frame. Everything down here is block and concrete. So it takes a special carpenter, and I always knew that. And I've encouraged my guys to hone their skills because, in my opinion, the best carpenter is a renovation carpenter because he not only has to just build, but he has to first take apart. So when you do that, you begin to understand how it was built and why it was built that way. So we, shortly after being here, maybe 5 or 6 years, I moved here and I came in 2000. We planted here in 2004, right before the flurry of hurricanes that hit that year. I remember Charlie the most, devastating all of Collier County with the winds. But we got invited to do some projects down here in the district, and that led us to meet at that time Elaine Reed, and we formed an alliance. She wanted to push the society forward, and we were able to help her do that and be able to answer the questions and kind of be the spokesperson for the district for anybody looking for help or direction on what to do with their property. But then in 2022, Ian hit. September 28th. And Ian hit. And it was a storm surge. They're guesstimating about 10 feet at Naples Pier. The devices failed at 6 feet. So they know it got that high. I don't know why we have storm devices that rely on electricity, but that's for another day. But so they're guessing that the storm surge here was 10 feet. That evening, we were in the middle of a project here. I drove down, which I always do when there's storms. I venture down to the beach and see what's happening. And I remember going down Gordon Drive and seeing the waves licking the side of the dune. And then I turned and looked and saw the street 3 or 4 feet below that. And I knew that downtown Naples was in trouble. I called everybody I knew that was down here and said, get out. This is going to be bad. And so that was that. Well, you know what happened? Ian came and brought in that storm surge and flooded most of the district. I think I came down that night. It was maybe 10 o'clock, and the water was all the way to the courthouse. And National Guard was here. They weren't letting anybody in, nobody out. They figured if you were here, you chose to stay. And it wasn't until the next day that the waters receded that that people were allowed to come back in. So I came down that morning and saw what had happened, saw some of our projects that had went underwater. A lot of money. It was a sad day to see that. But I was amazed when I came to Palm Cottage. I can't say if it was the next day or the day after to see 20, 30 volunteers pulling the furniture out of Palm Cottage, cleaning everything, people trying to clean up the yard and already taking a step towards rehabilitation of the cottage. We came in and with Elaine, and we walked in the main first floor, and the floor was buckled by probably 18 inches in spots. And I knew at that point that the floor had to come out. A lot of people said that we couldn't restore it, that this couldn't be done. But in Chicago, every historic home we worked on had wood floors, and wood staircases. So I reached out to my associates up there, who I've worked with for 35 years, and they said, here's what you do. Cut every board out and stack it, store it, and dry it out. So that's what we proposed, and that's what we began to do. So that was the plan. The big conversation, was we've done a lot of historical renovations where we've matched moldings, where we've matched details, where we've taken new products to use them to replace the old products. Maybe better. We use a lot of AZEK, which is a polyurethane down here that looks like wood on the outside of these homes, literally because it's termite proof, it's rot proof. Because we're a carpentry based millwork shop, we're able to replicate those things. All of that comes back from my roots in Chicago, where we were cutting knives to match moldings, putting on additions, things like that. I knew that Palm Cottage, we couldn't do that. We had to save everything that was in there. We could get another yellow pine floor, but it wouldn't be the same. We can match style, we can match color, we can match the wood species. What we can't match is age. That was the plan, was how are we going to save everything, every molding, every piece of flooring, and have Palm Cottage look exactly the way it did the day before the storm, only refreshed. The project began. The first thing to come up had to be the floor. We started cutting out. We knew that we had to take the floor up board by board, and you couldn't just rip them up because you would rip off the tongues of the wood flooring. So the flooring, these are pieces of the original floor, and so what we couldn't do was rip them out, and we tear off the tongue, and then the floor would be unusable. What we didn't anticipate was the floor was installed with the old box nails, which are hardened steel. So we literally had to take saws and cut every nail, pull up the board, and then grind off what was left of the nail on the back side so that we could begin the dry out process. That was a lengthy process. But we began to pull up the floor and then realized, I don't know if there was a major renovation done to Palm Cottage or not, but underneath the wood floor was a vapor barrier plastic. So, and there's a subfloor. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but so the water was trapped. So we knew the floor had to come out to be dried up. We pulled up all of the plastic, and after discussions with my flooring specialist up in Chicago, he simply said, take 1x2s, stack each board layer by layer, cross them over so you could get air moving all the way around them. We talked about taking the flooring to get kiln dried. But after thinking about that, this floor, because of its proximity in Southwest Florida, would never get to those levels that you would see, let's say, in the north. So we knew that we had to get it down to maybe 10 or 11%. That was about as low as we were going to get it. 8% is ideal, but we call it acclimating. We want to get that floor to a moisture level where it will remain for the rest of its life. and be stable. Pulling up the floor caused another issue. We knew that we were not going to be able to save 100% of the floor. We were going to damage some, and then getting every board in an exact same spot was going to be impossible. So I reached out after a lot of research and found out that there was a Southern Yellow Pine Association for Florida. The woman there was just a pot of information about flooring. So what she said to do was send me a piece of the flooring. I'll be able to tell you how old it is and what part of Florida it came from. So we shipped the floor up there, and they tell me that they were river pine, and the trees were hundreds of years old. So they could get close to that with that. So our thought was we could weave this into the existing floor, and you would never know. What we didn't know was that every board in Palm Cottage is a different width, by 1/8 inch up to 3/8 of an inch. So we were going to have to isolate this to a room. And if you go in Palm Cottage, maybe you haven't noticed, but the theater has the yellow pine, the new yellow pine that we use to blend in. You'll see that the graining is a little bit tighter. It's not as pronounced. So it is a little bit different. Upon learning that, I was upset, I guess, because learning how priceless this floor was, I had seen people all over the district just tossing it out to the street. And it was too late. Trucks had already come. Stuff was gone. At any rate, we took the flooring and we didn't take it to a kiln. We said, let's make Palm Cottage its own drying facility. So we stacked all of the boards in the main living room and through the library everywhere we can, and then had spacers in between each board. And then we just installed a bunch of dehumidifiers and fans. And we let those run for, I think, close to 3 months. Checking the floor every couple of weeks, checking the moisture content. And then when it got back down to 10%, we knew that we would be good to install. So with the floor up, there was a lot of other things that had to go into the renovation. The electrical, any electrical that gets wet with salt water has got to come out. After that storm, there was a lot of people all the way through Naples that were trying to clean things, and there was reported fires, small fires, nothing burned down, for the next year because that salt continued to erode at the electrical components. So anything in Palm Cottage that got wet was replaced. We pulled all new wires and all new electrical. Anytime that you do a historical renovation, we now have the opportunity to maybe correct some things or improve some things that without compromising the character of the structure. But we're opening walls, we're opening floors. Now we're able to take care of some of those problems. Palm Cottage is a little different also when it comes to the plaster work. The plaster in Palm Cottage is plastered directly over the cinder block. There's no furring like you see in a lot of the houses here, but it's directly adhered. There's some good and bad with that because if the block picks up moisture, it wants to push off some of the stucco on the inside. So what we were able to do was strip down the whole, any loose plaster from the base of the first floor walls, and then apply a bonding agent and then put new plaster over that. The interior walls had been re-drywalled at some point. There was double layers, so we had to cut those up. We replaced everything with Durarock, which is a cement board. That's pretty common for us for doing repairs on stucco because plaster, and stucco are concrete materials. Drywall is a gypsum material. So they expand and contract at different rates. So when we've done all of our old homes, we've made sure that even if we got a great plaster guy, we always got cracks. So we came up with these concepts to lay over the top of it and re-drywall or re-plaster, re-skim coat. Plaster is a lost art in the States anyway. I did a mission trip to Africa last year, and they're still actively doing plaster the old world way, the way we used to do it here. Everything here now has been replaced with wood crown moldings and drywall, and any way to do it faster, right? All of the plaster then was redone inside. When we pulled off the base of the staircase is when we found the time capsule. So there was a box in there that had some information in it and a note, and it was from a couple of guys that had done a renovation before. So before we closed up the staircase, everybody that wanted to put some more information. So that time capsule is underneath the base of the stairs going to the second floor. The other thing that I talk about, doing some improvements, when we ripped out the floor, Elaine had seen that we had exposed part of the tabby foundation. And that's where if you've been in Palm Cottage, that's where the glass panel came in. We had some high density acrylic made so that when you walk into the kitchen that you can see that tabby foundation. Tabby concrete is a combination of seashells, sand, and cement. So seashells are what they use the aggregate as the aggregate for the concrete. Palm Cottage was done well because we see very little deterioration. A lot of homes, not so well, because when they use seashells, they're salt. So if the shells are not cleaned properly, that salt is in the concrete. And if there's rebar or reinforcing steel in the concrete, that rebar begins to rust, it begins to expand, it begins to spall off the concrete. That is the reason for what happened in Sunrise. The ocean had continued to beat on that building and beat at that building. They did not keep up with the maintenance, which means literally inspecting, caulking any cracks, any joints, any windows, to not allow that salt water, which is hitting our structures 24/7. It finds its way to the rebar, concrete begins to fail. So in Southwest Florida, Naples, anybody that's on the beach, all of these concrete structures have to really have their maintenance plan in place, or Mother Nature will have its way with the concrete. But Palm Cottage didn't have any of that. When we went to do Smith Exhibit Hall, we did find that. Back then, and I've seen this over in South Beach, the workers, in some cases, will literally go to the beach and get the shells, go to the beach and get the water and mix their concrete. So I've seen some buildings in Miami Beach that are crumbling because it's the salt. So you'll see down in Port Royal and Old Naples, you'll see people with mimicking tabby foundations. Literally what they do is they put stucco up there and they have this machine that shoots the shells onto the wall, and then they trowel it in so it looks like an old tabby foundation. But even then, we have to rinse all of those shells and make sure all of the salt is gone. So we saw that. We opened up the floor to create that pass-through or that look-through. We put some LED lights around it so people could actually see what the foundation looked like. Elaine said a Schlitz can had to go in there. I wish I knew the story, but apparently whoever was the founder of Schlitz had something to do with Old Naples. I'm sorry, I don't know that story, but that's why the Schlitz can stayed down there. So Because the floor was installed over a vapor barrier plastic, we were forced to go back because of the elevation of all the doors, the moldings. We were forced to go back to that same application. So instead, we put down a ProFlex barrier. It's a 60 mil urethane. It's used a lot here for sound control, for vapor barrier, for crack isolation. So that's what we used there. And you can glue to it because it's fully adhered to the floor. So when we reinstalled the floor in Palm Cottage, we glued and nailed it because the tongues were, the wood is, it's old. And we didn't want boards coming up or squeaking, so we glued it and nailed it. I brought my guys from Chicago to refinish the floor. We used a local guy to install, very patient guy, small company. He had to literally sort through the boards and find enough boards that were the same width to go from this wall to that wall, and then the next row, and the next row, and the next row. Why I brought the guys from Chicago to refinish the floor, it's because you can't get, the floor fortunately had a lot of sandings left in it. See, there's still another 1/4 inch left from the tongue to the surface. When you're sanding, you're taking maybe a 1/16. So we knew that we had room to sand. Unfortunately, when a wood floor is put down, these aren't run through a planer and calibrated, and then they put it down. They sand it in place. So some floor areas of the floor could get sanded more than others. So we had to be very careful when we were putting the floor together that we made sure that we knew where these areas were, that we didn't bury the machine down. Now it's time to put the moldings back in. And every molding in the house, when we took it off, it was nailed with the same cut nails. My guys call them cut nails, the old box nails. And the guys called me and said, "We can't get this stuff off. They use concrete nails." And I said, "No, guys, those are box nails." And if you, even today, they might call them common, but I still remember when they called them box nails. So those are when blacksmiths made the nails, and they're hardened steel. We got everything off with minimal damage, but we had to label every board, every piece of casing, where it went, and then reinstall everything. There were some repairs, of course, especially in the kitchen because the bookshelves, I guess I'm going to call it butler's pantry, for lack of a better word, that goes to the kitchen. Those shelves were falling apart. They had been mostly covered in water, submerged. So we rebuilt those. There were some areas in the back that had to be redone. But we did everything back in character. Some of the boards were notched out. We matched what was there so that it would look exactly the way it was from the beginning. We got all the moldings back up. And then the painter was confused about how he was going to restore the woodwork. We did not want it stripped because that was one of the main reasons when we first came in to assess the cottage, was that I can't mimic this. This is shellac and varnish and years and dents and scratches that we wanted to preserve. So my direction to him was simply this: just let's get everything back up. Let's do any repairs we have to. Scuff everything down, wipe everything down with a stain to be able to build it up, to blend everything back together, and then top coated everything with the urethane to match the floor. So everything came back exactly the way it was supposed to be, only refreshed. So, and that's what we have today. We're real happy. We ended up doing some siding because they had water issues, and then the Smith exhibit hall was tabled. We were in the middle of that project, or planning that project. That got tabled until Palm Cottage was again restored. I want to say this, and we're doing a project in the Bank of the Everglades, and very similar project when it comes to the floor. The Everglades project is a wood structure, the old bank building, the old Bank of the Everglades building. It is by far the largest wood frame restoration I've ever seen, and it's intense. They called us there to do that project because of the floor here at Palm Cottage. Only there we're going to reinstall the floor over the top of the floor joist because they know they're going to get water again. Then the water runs back out, and because the floor is not on a subfloor, it will dry out. It causes some problems with the county because they have insulation requirements. So it was my suggestion that we put the thermal break on the footing wall. Therefore, we're treating the crawl space like air-conditioned space. If you get a chance, check out our website, our Facebook. We've shot a ton of videos down there, and you can see what's going on. It's a really fun project. But with that, I'm going to say, renovation and restoration of old structures, that's in my blood. God has a calling on my life for this and for sharing my skills with kids. And projects like this and like Palm Cottage could not be more important. I said this in Everglades City. I'm going to say it here. We live in a throwaway world. We throw away everything. Our cars, our clothes, our marriages, everything. And I'm not certain that's what God's asked of us. So I think when we do things like we're doing with Palm Cottage, that we are stewarding the resources that he gave us correctly and not being wasteful. So it's a pleasure to be here. Anybody, if I could be of any service, if you have a building down here, you just need some help or direction, please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to help. But it is an honor being here and being a part of this part of Naples that, in my mind, defines Naples. And I hope that we can all come together and do whatever it is we can to convince the neighbor or the developer or the new owner to do the right thing and work with what they've got. We can take old structures and we can put all of the new modern technology and things they want without ripping them apart. Does it take more time? Yes. Does it take more money? Yes. But there's nothing like it. Once you have that, you'll have one of a kind. So, and we're banking on that. We just, we think that, especially here in Old Naples, people are turning back to that, back to the old world, back to the real thing, instead of things that get shipped from other countries that we just throw in, and when we're done with them, toss them out. So with that, I thank you for that. And I guess we're going to open it up for any questions that anybody might have.
You mentioned some of the things that you discovered as part of the renovation. We're continually finding things here. In fact, I'm holding in my hand 5 of those box nails that I found yesterday that you referenced. Another thing that was surprising and interesting to find in our archives, I found some recreated as-built plans and a site plan for Palm Cottage. I think it was going back to the 80s or early 90s. And the interesting thing about it, nobody here had seen, this particular set had an archaeological key in the corner. And it referenced some of the things that they had found at some point in the past. There was a masonry trowel that they had indicated on there. I think some buried pets over the years they indicated there. So, and actually, this one a little dubious, but back where the outhouse used to be, I did find a preserved corn cob. I'm not going to go any further into detail on that one. That one will not be part of our permanent collection. So my question for you is, when the floor was removed, did you find anything interesting or evidence of any archaeological activity that someone had done here in the past?
No, I think the Schlitz can was about it. We did, you would think you'd do major demo on a bank down in Everglades City. We didn't find one penny. So, there's, I'm sure that all of the work that was at Palm Cottage was done by weekend warriors, we call them, right? Everybody gets together like a barn raising. Hey, Palm Cottage needs a coat of paint. Hey, we got a problem with the front door. Let's go over. We'll grab a couple beers and get it fixed for them. That's one thing we did find in Everglades, though, the liquor bottles in the ground. So, but that was typical with Masons. The bricks were over here and the beer was over there. But they got it done. And but I think with all of that activity, it's not like Palm Cottage was just sitting. There was always people working and doing things. We've done a lot of work in older buildings where we did find things. Newspapers were a very popular way to insulate your attic. So on some of these structures, we would have to go up into the attic, and we would find old newspapers from 70, 80 years old, and so it was interesting. But then the owners would always want those because we found them in their house. But any other questions?
What was the moisture content in the wood?
It was about 27% is where it was at right after the storm. So you guys that were here, I'm assuming most of you were here for Ian. It didn't just bring in the water, it brought in that nasty sludge. And that sludge, as it dried on top of the floor, got like concrete. There was a friend of mine, Irma hit the Keys, Everglades City with storm surge. We dodged that in Naples because the backside of the storm died before it got here. But I had talked to a buddy of mine down in the Keys, and he said, "Do you have that sludge?" And I said, "Yeah, what is that?" He said, "That's Mother Nature throwing back all the stuff that we threw into the Gulf." But the bank, we're going to finish up. We had a lot of work down there, and we're building in the swamp. Let me put it that way. So there was a lot of subsurface issues with voids in the ground and dewatering. The bank property is actually below high tide. We have the storm sewers plugged so the water can't come back onto our property. But we got through all of that, and they're pouring the concrete now, which is extensive. We installed pilings, grouted pilings underneath the whole building. We did not raise the bank of the Everglades. Not my decision, but it was made by the people before me. So it's going to get flooded again. When, and same thing. It's not if, it's when, right? And how bad. But we'll be done with the concrete, looks like about the second week of April. And then that'll be it for that project. They've got to find some more money. We started that project. They had some state funding, and they knew they didn't have enough money to finish, so we broke it into phases. They were hoping, and they're still hoping, that once we get that building looking like something with the new concrete and staircases and second floor and the old addition gone, that they're going to be able to raise that excitement again that, hey, this could really happen. Because it's sat since Irma is when they had 6 or 7 feet of water in there. So I hope if they find the rest of the money, we probably have another year there. It's intense. The finishes are intense because, again, it's got the old vault that we sandblasted. All of those finishes have to be brought back. But it'll be fun. It'll be a fun project.
Sorry, why wasn't the bank raised?
I don't know. They came, I think it was a decision made by the society not to raise it. I know that they went to SHPO for approval. Unfortunately, what happened was they came to us, they came to my office and said, this is what we've got, and we're told you're the guy for the job. But it was government money, so they had to go through the whole bid process. We were not allowed to offer any kind of value engineering, any kind of changes, any kind of recommendations. We were forced to bid the project exactly the way it was laid out. It was only after they came back with a short list of 2 contractors that we were able to value engineer, and we shaved over $1 million off of the project. But they had already determined that it's staying at that level. But that's the reason that the floor is going to stay directly over the floor joist. So, and there's flood vents at the first floor. So we're going to but that's Everglades City. They let the water come in, they let it flow out, they sweep it out, and they're good with it. So We're making as many provisions as we can to make sure that if they do get flooded, it's not a major renovation by using, same thing, Durarock cement board on the walls. So simply you can air everything out, pull the baseboards, drill holes, and get everything air that's wet, get it dried out. Anybody else?
On the floor here, you said you numbered and labeled all the molding, but the floor you did not?
No, too many pieces, yeah. So we pulled it up. We didn't even realize that they were different thicknesses or widths until he went to reinstall. So literally it was, all right, I have a 3-inch board. I got to find 4 more to make this run. So as long as you put them end to end, right, it doesn't matter as what the next one is. The next one could be 2 inches. It doesn't matter as long as they line up so we didn't get any big gaps. But, I've seen flooring spaced by a 1/4 inch. We've laced in floors in some of the projects in Chicago where we were putting on an addition and the floor actually had spaces. And so we had to mill our flooring down to match theirs and literally space our boards as we went. And we call it lacing so we could tie all the floor in and then refinish the whole floor. And you could vaguely tell that it was added onto. If you get the original material, because, we run into this all the time. You could buy pine or cedar or white oak or red oak. Well, where did it come from? What state did it come from? Did it come from wetlands? Was it high and dry? All of those affect the character and the color of the wood flooring. Anybody else?
I just want to say that if anybody told me I'd be listening to a talk for an hour on flooring, I would be bored out of my mind, but you made it very interesting, so thank you.
Thank you. It's really fun stuff, bringing things back to life. In Naples, that's what brought me here, because when I came here, nobody was doing renovations. And I knew that I could find a position down here where we could do things. But people, that's changed, since the Home Depots, came up and the Lowe's came up and now you got the HGTV and Pinterest. People's, they get excited about these things. And before that, our clients were usually not really informed. But now with the internet and all of this, you can find out for yourself. And people, when we talk about wood, we do a woodworking class at our shop for kids. People are so excited to be able to have that experience with their kids. I was fortunate that I had my dad, my father, my grandfather, and uncles that came before me that showed me that work ethic, that showed me the value of doing things the right way, the value of not just tossing things to the curb and buying new. So my opinion, we're seeing a shift back to the real deal. And I love it because it's exciting. It's fulfilling. And, we hope that when our guys are working on a project, they're not just working for a paycheck, they're working for a purpose. And and all of you that live in the district, we're part of that. So we're not just restoring Everglades Bank. We didn't just restore Palm Cottage. We're sending a message that, hey, you don't have to toss it. You don't have to tear it down. How does that happen? I think it's going to involve government, city government, state government, county government, to make it an advantage for developers to keep it. The one big thing that has to be gone, and it's an important point, is when I first came down and I didn't know about the Historical Society, everybody I had talked to down here had this stigma that if I go to the Historical Society, they're going to tell me what I can and what I can't do. And I believed that until I met Elaine Reed. I'm like, no, guys, that's not the case. They can help us. They helped us push through a number of projects. by sending and going to the meetings with us, to the city meet, to the planning commission meetings, to the city council meetings, to get these things pushed through. Once we got through the red tape and got in front of city council and in front of the planning commission, it was unanimous. It was just getting through that red tape. That's what I think our city needs to do. If they want to save Old Naples, they have to make that path easy for developers and easy for owners. I don't know if it comes in tax breaks or if it comes in expedited permit process, permit fees, if they want to save it. That's because the people coming, the successful people and prominent people that are coming to Naples and building these homes, they don't want to be told what to do. They just don't, and I get it, but I think we've been working to try and push people to the Historical Society because I know that if we're in unison, then we can make things happen. And that's why I address all of you that live in the district. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can voice our concerns because you can see what's happening, and it's sad. And we can't stop it all, but, Market Naples, everybody uses this part of town to draw people to Naples. But then we're sitting watching it go away. Why are we not doing something about it? And so it is in Naples' best economic future to save Old Naples, or even not even just the district, but I've seen so many homes torn down in the last 20 years that were, that buddy of mine that I told you was working down in Port Royal hasn't been here for about 18 years. And when I told him a couple of weeks ago what was happening, he was floored. But, our voices matter. And whatever we can do as individuals, and that comes together collectively to try and preserve what we've got. Palm Cottage is a great anchor for that. And so I just hope that it continues. Thank you so much.